For years, Mr. Geraldo spoke ... and no one listened. His words, once full of enthusiasm and memory, were lost in the noise of time, muffled by walls, absences, and the fast pace of the world. What happens to a man when his stories stop mattering? Even in his own home? How many incredible people have we let pass by because they were too old? And does the brightness of a dream really fade with age, or does it just stay hidden behind wrinkles and silence? The answer may be more painful than you imagine. Most dreams don't die for lack of chance ... They die for lack of listening. And the brightness doesn't fade. It just gets dull, waiting for the right moment to burn again. Mr. Geraldo always had a deep gaze, the kind that seems to hold an entire world behind its iris. At 82 years old, he had already buried friends, the love of his youth, and a bunch of plans that only existed in the drawers of his mind. He was one of those gentlemen you pass on the sidewalk and barely notice. Plaid shirt, leather flip-flops, soft-spoken. Almost no one knew that behind his shuffling gait lived a passionate storyteller, a dreamer who one day wanted to be a writer, a radio host, maybe even an actor. But life is a master at teaching silence. There were so many times when he tried to share a memory and was interrupted by someone who was in a hurry or stuck on their cell phone. Little by little, he became silent. Not because he wanted to, but because he no longer had anyone to share his stories with. He would spend his afternoons in the rocking chair in the backyard, looking up at the sky as if he were trying to recall memories with his eyes. And no one noticed how much it hurt Dot until, one afternoon, a curious granddaughter decided to point her cell phone at her grandfather and say, "Tell that story again, Grandpa ... And for the first time in years, someone listened, for real. "Tell that story again, Grandpa ... Her voice, sweet and unhurried, broke the silence of a warm afternoon. Geraldo, a little surprised, slowly looked up. His thoughts were lost in his childhood, when his father still planted corn in red soil and he ran barefoot, with his feet full of dust and his heart full of the future. He looked at his granddaughter with that shy smile of someone who is no longer used to being asked to talk, much less to being listened to. "The one about the jaguar?" he asked. His eyes lit up. She laughed. "Of course, Grandpa. The one where you always come up with a different ending." And it was there, without a script, without lighting, without an audience, that it all began. His granddaughter, 17 years old, named Malu, was on vacation and had gone to spend a few days with him and her grandmother. She picked up her cell phone without thinking, leaned it on a small pot of ferns, and pressed record. Geraldo adjusted his cap, leaned forward in his rocking chair, and began to speak. His tone of voice was low, but full of intention. He paused, looked at the horizon, gestured calmly, and told how he had almost been eaten by a jaguar when he was a boy, or at least that was what he left out. The story lasted about 5 minutes. It had some serious parts, some funny parts. It had some exaggeration, some drama, and it had that way of his of turning a simple memory into a real spectacle. When he finished, Malu turned off the camera and said, laughing, "Grandpa, you're a character. I'm going to post this on TikTok." He frowned, not understanding. "TIK ... What?" She explained quickly, but he still had no idea what that was. He just said, "As long as my face doesn't end up in the newspaper ... okay." The next day, Malu woke up with her phone vibrating nonstop. The video had surpassed 20,000 views in less than 12 hours. People from all over the country were commenting, "This grandpa is a treasure. He reminded me of my grandfather. Record more stories with him, please." People were thirsty for something that was not seen so much on social media anymore. Truth, lightness, and someone telling a story as if they were sitting at the stove. She showed him the comments. Geraldo was silent for a while. His expression was hard to decipher. It wasn't euphoria. It was deeper, a kind of joy that is mixed with surprise and a little pain, the kind that appears when someone realizes that they spent years believing that no one else cared. Asterisk in the following days, Malu recorded more videos, some with old stories, others with reflections that he made naturally about time, longing, love, loss. His way of speaking was captivating. The phrases were packed with wisdom that cannot be learned from any book, only by living. And without them realizing it, each video accumulated thousands of views, then hundreds of thousands, until one of them exploded. More than 8 million people watched Geraldo, talking about the day he kissed his grandmother for the first time and thought he was going to faint from nervousness. That was the day that a famous content producer reposted the video, saying, "If this man had a channel, I would watch it every day." From that moment on, everything began to change. People called from TV shows, radio stations, news portals. They wanted to interview the grandfather of Brazil. But Malu and her family decided to take it slow. What Geraldo had to offer was not a product, it was feeling. And he himself made it clear from the beginning. He did not want to become a celebrity. He wanted to continue being himself with his slippers, his rocking chair, and his backyard. Even so, the videos kept growing. Over time, they opened a channel for him, but always under Malu's care. She edited it with care, added subtitles, and made sure to keep everything as simple as it was in real life. Soon Geraldo started receiving letters, gifts, invitations. Some people would travel miles just to meet him, take a picture, give him a hug. The street where he lived, which used to be quiet, began to be full of curious people and admirers. He laughed at all of this, but inside, something had changed. For the first time in a long time, he no longer felt like he was disappearing. He felt like he still existed. And more than that he was still useful. That what he carried inside, his memories, values, stories, still had a place in the world. His granddaughter asked him one day, "Grandpa, did you know all of this was going to happen?" He shrugged his shoulders with that calm demeanor. "I just knew that my life had been too good to die in silence." The wooden gate no longer closed properly from opening it so much. Neighbors who used to walk by now said good morning with a smile and a cell phone in their hands. Delivery men left boxes with senders from states that Geraldo didn't even remember existed. Sometimes someone would ring the doorbell just to say, "Thank you," and he, with that serene look, received everything kindly, as if he understood that the world was repaying an old debt. 82. He was beginning to feel that he was still part of something bigger. He wasn't just another old man in a forgotten corner. He was Geraldo from the video, the grandpa from the stories, the one who, without meaning to, made thousands of people smile every day. But what moved him the most was not fame. It was the messages. People of all ages wrote to say that they had remembered their own grandfather, that they had decided to visit their grandmother after watching his videos, that they had cried when they heard a memory of him. Some even said that they were depressed and, because of a phrase he said, "Missing someone is a beautiful way for time to remind you that it was worth it." They decided to seek help. Seu Geraldo could not believe that, with that voice that barely came out without clearing his throat, he had touched the hearts of so many people. He would say to Malu, always with humility, "I only talk about what I experienced, my daughter." And that was exactly what it was. People were enchanted because he did not pretend. He did not use cliches. He did not act. He told life as it was, full of hardships, but also full of beauty in the simple corners. He would talk about his childhood on the farm, about the fear he had when his son got sick, about the promises he made to Donna Lourdes when they were still secretly dating. He would talk about the day he sold his bicycle to pay for a dress for his daughter for the school dance, and how he cried in secret when she graduated. The internet, accustomed to filters, quick cuts, and ready-made jokes, seemed to stop and listen. Each new video was like a hot coffee on a winter morning, simple, but welcoming. The impact of this was not limited to social media. Some schools began showing the videos in writing classes. Teachers said that students wrote better after hearing a story from him. College students sent in papers with analyses of the phenomenon of intergenerational connection. Psychologists used the videos in therapy with the elderly. And that was how, little by little, Geraldo's name began to circulate not only on social media, but in spaces he never imagined he would be a part of. One day, he received an invitation to participate in an event in Brasilia. They wanted him to speak about aging and belonging. He, who could barely use WhatsApp, would now have to catch a plane and speak in front of hundreds of people. Malu, always by his side, said she would go with him. "What if I freeze?" he asked, laughing, as he adjusted the linen pants they had bought just for the occasion. "Grandpa, you spent 82 years speaking from the heart. Just keep doing that." On the day of the talk, the audience stood up before he had even said the first word. Some were already crying just seeing him walk in slowly, wearing the same hat as always and the shy smile that had become his trademark. He sat down, adjusted the microphone, and looked around, still looking in disbelief. When he began to speak, there was absolute silence. I thought my life would end without anyone having heard what I had to say. And then, suddenly, you all showed up. It was almost 20 minutes of simple words, memories, advice, laughter. At the end, they gave a standing ovation. But Geraldo was not impressed by that. What really moved him was when an elderly woman approached him with tears in her eyes and said, "I stopped talking too. My children are always busy. My grandchildren are always on their phones. But after I saw your videos, I started telling stories to my great-granddaughter. And she listens." Geraldo held her hand for a few seconds. He squeezed it tightly and said softly, "It's never too late to start talking again. You just need someone willing to listen." When he returned home, the applause still seemed to beat inside his chest. He sat back down in the rocking chair, looked up at the sky the same way as before. But now it was different. He knew that, outside, thousands of people were waiting for the next video, the next story. And more than that, he knew that, somehow, he had found his place in the world again. The rocking chair remained in the same place, under the acerola tree, but Geraldo's heart was already in another time. Something had been lit inside him. It wasn't fame or vanity. It was an old, almost forgotten fire, a desire to share, to teach, to be present. For the first time in decades, he woke up with plans in his head. His voice, previously used only for short conversations and solitary mumblings, now gained space, intention. He began to write. Simple things with small, neat handwriting, sometimes a little crooked. He used a spiral notebook that Malu bought, where he wrote down stories, phrases, ideas for videos. And when he couldn't write everything down, he dictated them to her. "If I had done this before," he said, looking at the paper as if it were a mirror of time. And the truth is that, one day, he wanted to. When he was young, he dreamed of being a radio broadcaster. At the time, I would be glued to the radio in the classroom, imitating the announcers, practicing my voice, writing down headlines in my school notebook. But it never went beyond that. Life took me in other directions, farming, then carpentry, then children. I lived, paid the bills, burying plan after plan. Now, as an old man, the dream returned. But different, more mature, freer of pretensions. It was no longer about fame. It was about doing something that had value. And then the invitations came. not only for interviews, but to talk to people. Youth groups, senior citizen meetings, seminars on family, education, humanity. Malu organized everything. She became a kind of producer, assistant, and inseparable friend. Everywhere they went, they carried a folding stool and a sign with the name, Stories of Sue Geraldo for those who still believe in life. They didn't charge. They just asked for water and time. And wherever they went, they filled the rooms. People were moved. Children were enchanted. Adults were touched in a way that few speeches could provoke. Senator Geraldo spoke without rushing. Each story was filled with emotion as if it were being told for the last time. And at the end, he always left a thought, the kind that moves you inside. Simple but profound things, like, those who miss someone are those who lived right. Don't rush so much, because time already passes too quickly for you. Love is like planting. It takes work, but one day it turns into shade. These phrases began to circulate on T-shirts, school bulletin boards, and motivational posts. But what was most surprising was the direct impact. People sent videos thanking him. Young people said they called their grandparents after months. Elderly couples recorded their own stories. A national campaign was even launched using one of his speeches as its theme, Listen before the silence speaks for them. And then came the most unexpected invitation, Grandpa. They asked you to open a TED Talk in São Paulo. Do you know what that means? He frowned. It's like a bunch of elegant people on a fancy stage, right? Malu laughed. Yeah, more or less like that. But they want to hear you. Your story. They want you to tell the whole world. He remained silent. He thought for several minutes, looking at the sky in the backyard. Then he answered with a small smile. Then it's time to put a suit on that plaid shirt. On the day of the event, the room was packed. Cameras, lights, lapel microphones. Malu was nervous, maybe more than he was. But Geraldo entered calmly, slowly, with the same firm and humble step. He began speaking as if he were in his backyard. And that's how he won over an audience accustomed to great speakers. He talked about his childhood, his stumbles, his losses, his small joys. He talked about the time when he thought he had nothing left to offer. The day Malu heard him, and everything changed. At the end, he looked at the audience and said, I thought my dreams had died. But I discovered that they were just sleeping, and all they needed was a good reason to wake up. Applause. Long, warm, standing. On the flight back, Malu held her cell phone, answering messages, organizing her schedule. Geraldo looked out the window, thoughtful. After a while, he spoke without taking his eyes off the sky. Do you know what's most beautiful about all this? What, Grandpa? It's that I'm teaching and learning at the same time. I learned that we're not born old. We're born dreaming. And we only really get old when we stop dreaming. Geraldo's routine was no longer silent. Every week, Malu printed a list of invitations, messages, and suggestions of stories that his followers wanted to hear. There were people asking for advice on marriage, others wanted to know how to deal with grief, and some just said, Thank you for existing. It was beautiful to see how that man, once forgotten even by his own neighbors, was now part of the daily lives of millions of people. Despite this, nothing about him changed beyond what was important. He still woke up early, drank black coffee with stale bread, and sat in the rocking chair to talk to the wind. He still played with the dogs in the backyard, watered the plants, and made a point of watching the sunset as if it were a unique spectacle. The difference was that now the world also sat there with him. Over time, they began to call him living. Heritage. Schools asked for his presence. Universities cited his videos and research on aging and the power of listening. He became the theme of a mental health campaign, received a Medal of Honor from the City Council, and a reading room in A public school was named after him. When asked what he thought of all this, he would simply say, "That's affection." And affection never hurts. Malu, who previously only wanted to record a memory with her grandfather, was now seen as the mentor of one of the most exciting projects on the Brazilian internet. She grew up with him, but she never lost her granddaughter's gaze. She made a point of protecting him from excess, of keeping everything at his pace. Sometimes she said no to big invitations because she knew that Geraldo's greatest treasure was to continue living as he had always lived. With time, calmly, and truthfully, he began to write more, encouraged by people who asked for a book. And so, O Mundo que Numa Memoria was born, a collection of his stories and thoughts, which soon became a hit in bookstores. The launch was emotional. People lined up just to get an autograph and hear a direct phrase from the author. Some people cried before even getting close, as if they were meeting someone who had always been there. But what touched Geraldo most deeply was not the success of the book, nor the TV shows. That was when he saw other elderly people gaining ground because of what he had started. He saw old ladies making cooking videos, grandfathers teaching how to sew, long-time couples dancing in the living room and being applauded by millions. He saw families reconnecting, grandchildren listening attentively, parents reviewing the way they treated their own parents. "See, Malu?" he said. "Sometimes, to change the world, all you need to do is change your perspective." One morning, while he was drinking his coffee, he received a letter, handwritten on a yellowed envelope from the interior of Maranhão. It was from a retired teacher who wrote something simple. "You made me understand that I can still be important. Thank you for making me exist again." Su Geraldo read the letter in silence, and when he finished, looked at Malu with moist eyes. "This letter is worth more than any prize." Lately, he has been talking more and more about what he wanted to leave behind. Not in terms of money, but in terms of feelings. He wanted people to remember him as someone who never stopped feeling, who valued memory as a gift, not as a burden, who believed that old age was not the end of anything, but a different way of continuing to exist. "I was once a child, a grown man, a father, a widower. Now I am a bridge. A bridge between what I was and what I can still be." It was Malu who wrote this phrase on a banner that was put up for his 84th birthday. The party was in the backyard with a long table, a flowered tablecloth, and lots of laughter. There was cornmeal cake, an accordion, and a surprise visit from some followers who became true friends. And there, between hugs and stories told, with a pleasure, Geraldo closed his eyes for a moment and thought that life had been more generous than he had expected. At the end of the party, he sat down in the rocking chair. Malu, as always, approached with her cell phone. "Grandpa, can I record one last question?" He smiled. "Only if I can answer from the heart. If you could leave a message for those who are listening now. What would you say?" He looked at the already orange sky, took a deep breath, and said, "Never despise the voice of those who have lived a long time. Because sometimes it is in that voice that the missing piece of your own story lives." The camera stopped recording. But life continued to touch the hearts of each person who, for a few minutes, stopped to listen. And if you also believe that stories like Geraldo's deserve to be remembered, lived, and spread, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel. There is always something new to come, and sometimes all we need is to stop for a few minutes and listen with our hearts.